Hi, I'm Shashank Bhargav, and you're listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. It has now been over a month since farmers have been protesting in the national capital. These protests are some of the biggest farm protests the country has ever seen. The farmers, who are largely from Punjab and Haryana, are demanding that the centre repeal its three new farm laws that they feel will leave them at the mercy of big private players, and that they would eventually be forced to sell crops at a much lower price. There have been multiple talks that have taken place between the central government and the farmer unions, but the divide between the two sides seems to have only hardened. There is apprehension, fear, frustration, and anger against the government and these new contentious laws. Recently, Vandita Mishra, Indian Express's national opinion editor, who's been covering politics for nearly 20 years now, took a week long journey across the state of Punjab to talk to farmers about their concerns. And in this episode, we speak to Vandita about her journey, what farmers told her, and what these protests mean for the politics in the region. She starts by telling us that she had actually started her journey at the Singhu border itself, the Haryana and Delhi border where farmers have been protesting, and it had really taken her aback.
I was taken aback by the extent to which the protest has spread in terms of people who are not out there necessarily protesting, but who are following the protest from their homes, who are participating in it in some manner or the other now. So you have villages where the farmers' unions are asking for contributions per acre of land that the family holds. For instance, in one village, I found that farmers were contributing about rupees 200 to an acre. In other villages, there is no such, rate. There is nothing set, but farmers are sending contributions in terms of members of their family are traveling, coming back, going again, taking turns, or you have provisions. You have wheat and rice and mattresses and blankets that are being sent in these tractor trolleys that are going down the highways.
And she says that if you were on the highways in Punjab, you'd see these tractor trolleys all along. The other thing that Vandita noticed during the protests was that it's not just farmers and farm related professionals who have mobilized by now, but it's also people like traders and agricultural professors.
In traders, for instance, in Amritsar, I went to the city's cloth and shoe markets, and shopkeepers there were saying that about 60 to 70% of their customers actually come from the villages. And so they said that when the farmer has money, the farmer comes and spends in our markets. So what I was totally taken aback by was the extent to which this protest has sparked sympathy, support, participation. And I am actually quite amazed that the central government has not seen this happen, and that this has been happening since months now. So the farm ordinances came in June, and in Punjab, letters to the DM and dharnas at petrol pumps and at toll plazas. All of this began at least 4 months ago. And this Delhi Chalo call came only in, I think, towards end November. It's completed a month now, the Delhi border protest. But protests in Punjab have been on since at least 4 to 5 months. And I think the center has not seen it or responded enough to it.
Now, during the protests, one narrative that has been propagated is that the farmers are actually being instigated by the middlemen who work in government mandis, called arthias. Vandita explains what exactly they do.
So the arthia is the commission agent, which means that when the farmer brings his crop to the mandi, the government mandi, the arthia is the one who weighs the crop, that cleans the crop, gets them packed into gunny bags, whatever. And then he charges a commission on every transaction. He's the middleman in that sense.
But he's not just a commission agent. She also points out that the arthia also doubles up as a money lender to the farmer.
So when the farmer is in need, generally, again, this is something that farmers will tell you over and over again. And at this moment, they are papering over, for instance, the fact that the arthia will charge you a very, very high rate of interest, much higher than the bank. But the farmers at this moment, this is a moment when the arthias and the farmers are coming together against the laws. So the farmer will tell you the positive side of it, which is also true, which is that if there is an emergency, the farmer can knock on the doors of the arthia. The bank will go by its procedures and its formalities and also a lot of paperwork. And the bank will also ask the farmer to mortgage his land, which the arthia will not. So the arthia will charge a very, very high extortionate rate of interest, but he will give the farmer money when the farmer wants it for the emergency use of the farmer, which the farmer will not get from the bank, because there will be paperwork, there will be time, there will be delay, and there will also be this fact of having to mortgage his land.
And so, if the government mandis are dismantled, which is what the farmers fear, Vandita says that it will be a loss for the arthias as well, a loss of livelihood and a way of life.
Because these are people who feel that when the big corporates come, they are going to be rendered useless and irrelevant, because the big corporates will look for better educated, tech savvy middlemen also. So it is a fight for their survival too, though it is very difficult. Actually, it is only in this moment that these two are together. But the artias' anxieties and concerns and the farmers' anxieties and concerns, there is a vast gulf between them, simply because a farmer is a much more vulnerable category, and that holds for both the small and big farmer. The arthia is a much more comfortably off set of actors.
But even so, the fear of losing jobs is what is driving arthias to protest as well. But Vandita says that she is clear that they are only supporting and not funding these protests. They are not what is driving all these agitations, which is what some in the BJP claim.
In fact, the head of the Arthia Association in the largest grain market in Punjab, which is the Khanna Mandi, I met him as well and spoke with him. And he told me that the fact is, he says, we've gone there, we've gone to Singhu border as well. And we've set up a separate tent for ourselves. I mean, the Arthia tent is separate from the rest of the farmers' tents. And he said that we offered to contribute, and the farmers said they don't need money from us. So I do not at all buy into this theory that is being, sold, that it is the Arthia who's funding this agitation or running it from behind the scenes. I think the Arthia, like many others, is supporting it, and for his own reasons. But it is certainly not the Arthia who is at the center of this agitation. It's not his concerns that are the center of the agitation. It is the farmers and their very real anxieties and concerns about these laws.
And Vandita points out that it's not just arthias. The BJP, she says, has its own cast of villains who they say are behind these agitations. And the villain keeps on changing based on which leader is talking.
And they will say that it is the Arthia who is funding the farmer. The Arthia is a businessman, so he's putting the farmer in front. And the second, they will say the Khalistanis are doing it. Third, they will say these are Naxalites. Fourth, they will say these are the leftists, because many of these farmer unions, their leadership is actually left oriented, if not left itself.
She says that this is actually a tack that the government uses to not engage with the anxieties and concerns of the farmers.
You can be charitable and say that the government is not seeing the reality, or the real thing is it is either in denial or it is simply being completely unwise in not seeing it for what it is.
Now, when talking about the concerns of the farmers, we have mentioned how the farmers fear that the new laws will leave them at the mercy of private players. And in that sense, an example that many farmers cited to Vandita was that of Jio and BSNL.
The Jio BSNL is a very frequently given example. And basically what they're saying is that for the first 2 or 3 years when the corporates come, they will give you very good prices. And once you are weaned away from the government mandi, you are going to the private player because you're getting a higher price, then suddenly the prices will crash. They will not give you as good prices. They will lower the prices. And by that time, the farmer will not have the alternative of the government mandi anymore, because the government may go on saying that the government mandi is still going to be there. We are not dismantling it. But they said that it will wither away due to neglect. So in 2 or 3 years, this will go.
And this is where the Jio BSNL example fits, because they say that this is what Jio did.
When Jio came in, it gave these free SIM cards or lowered its rates to wean away customers, and it drove prices, to the bottom. And then when it had driven enough consumers away from others and towards itself, that's when it started raising prices again. And now the fact is that Jio is dominant and BSNL, which was already in decline, has gone further into a downward spiral. So the Jio BSNL is an example that is very frequently given by farmers.
She heard this not just from those protesting at the Delhi border, but from across the state of Punjab in regions of Malwa, Doaba, and Majha. And this fear of large private players also comes from the fact that many farmers already deal with private players, but at a much smaller scale. Vandita explains that right now, two crops, wheat and paddy, are bought by the government at minimum support price or MSP, an assured price that doesn't fluctuate much. But for other crops like maize, sugarcane, or cotton, farmers don't get MSP from the government. And so they sell those to private traders. And their experience with them is not good.
So there was examples upon examples of them telling me, for instance, that the private trader will not take our grain when the price is good, or will store and then release to lower prices. So they say that in wheat and rice, where the government gives us an assured MSP, in contrast to the other crops where there is no MSP and we have to go to the private trader, the difference, the fluctuation is so much higher for the non MSP crops already because of the private trader manipulating, and we not being in a strong enough situation because we have to sell off our crop. We have no storage facilities. We cannot wait for later, which the private trader can. So already these anxieties about how the farmer will deal with the bigger corporate, these anxieties are stoked not by any lobby from outside, but by their own experience already of dealing with private traders on the crops for which they do not get an MSP, assured MSP. And that, in effect, is basically all the non wheat and non rice crops there.
And apart from private players, another set of argument that farmers point to is when they give the example of Bihar, where the APMC Act was revoked in 2006, and after that, the government mandis there became less effective.
What happened there was that they would say that the rice for which the procurement on MSP in Punjab is today 1700, 1800 per quintal. For that, the price in Bihar is 700 to 900 per quintal. So they would say that trucks go from here, or traders take their trucks there, buy the rice there, come back and sell it in Punjab at the MSP price and make a killing of, profit of something like 2 lakhs per truck. So this is already happening, and this the farmer is watching. It is happening, and he can see that this is happening. The second thing is that again and again, I was told that, look at these farm laborers, the people who come from Bihar to work on our lands. Often, many of these men who sow our rice or plant our rice in our fields own larger pieces of land than us back home in Bihar or UP, but they have to come and work as agriculture labor on our fields because they do not get assured MSP that we do.
So, whether it is the example of Bihar or having to deal with private players, Vandita says that the farmers' fears are grounded in reality and are not being stoked by an outside lobby. The other thing to note is that while these protests are happening because of the new farm laws, they are also about the larger state of affairs in Punjab. And the fact that farming, the way it is often the only option for many. To explain this, Vandita talks about the Green Revolution that took place in the 60s and 70s. That is when agricultural production went up thanks to things like adoption of modern technology, use of fertilizers, and the use of high yielding varieties of crops. This is what led to a lot of surplus produce being generated.
By 80s, when it had started plateauing already, the gains of the Green Revolution. When you should have started paying heed to, for instance, S.S. Johal is a very, very eminent agriculture economist. He gave a report in 1986 on crop diversification. Basically, it was a response to the fact that your gains have started plateauing. You need to break that. And one way of breaking it is to get out of this wheat rice cycle and to diversify into vegetables, horticulture, other things. So you did not do that. Now, there were two reasons why you did not take advantage of that moment to move agriculture into the next stage.
One reason was that in the 80s, Punjab was grappling with terrorism. The Khalistan movement, she says, was raging at that point. So it is possible that the government's attention was diverted because of it. But this, she says, is not the full reason. When she spoke to S.S. Johal, he pointed out that the reason was a complete neglect for the need of agricultural reform in the state.
He told me, for instance, that he was on the Punjab State Planning Board, a member of it for almost 18 years, and he says not one meeting was held. So he gives other examples of, making presentations. He was also a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Council. So making presentations which went nowhere. And as he puts it again and again, he would give reports and he said government would not turn the page.
The government did not address this need to reform agriculture, and at the same time, she says, did not set up other industries or bring in the IT sector. The education sector, too, was left crumbling.
So, in many, many villages that I went to in Malwa, for instance, the education level is class 12 and not beyond. So, these also stoke anxieties. The fact that you don't have industry, you don't have jobs, you don't have services, you only have agriculture, which plateaued long ago, and you did nothing about it. So, when you say that farmers, in the big picture, yes, you need to wean farmers off land out of agriculture, move them into manufacturing and services, because land holdings have become so fragmented that farming is not remunerative anymore, and the farmer himself and herself feels the need to do so many farmers told me that they do not want their children to be farmers because there is nothing here for them, they would say. But the fact also is that they also do not see where else to go. Where else would their children go? Because where are the jobs? Where are the industries? Where are the factories?
It is because of this reason, she says, that a lot of younger people in Punjab looking for better prospects have moved abroad, either to Canada or the US or Australia. And many of those who aren't as lucky to be able to fly out have fallen to drugs, which is another crisis that the state has been dealing with.
So, of course, all these anxieties are also gathering around right now the protests against the three farm laws. So, the sense is that you are trying to now tamper with the one assured thing that we had. In any case, farming is an insecure profession. In Punjab, it is a much more insecure profession because you don't have alternatives for farming families. And then there is this one assured thing that you have in the form of the MSP, and you are tampering with it without giving any kind of reassurance. There is no safety net.
So, this is what is driving the protests. And things remain stuck between the farmer unions and the central government, which in many ways is refusing to change its stance. Vandita says to understand these protests further, we need to understand that at the center of these protests is the Jat Sikh farmer.
The Jat Sikh farmer, there's no point in looking at what is the percentage in the state's population and saying, oh, it's only 20, 30, 40%. The point is that the Jat Sikh farmer is the centerpiece of the economy, the culture, the politics. So it's an interconnected framework where it all goes back to him. Now, there is a great sense of himself and the traditions of a martial race, the history. So for instance, this langar, that people here are marveling at, the fact that there is such free flowing food at the sites of protest, and in fact protesters will even feed the policeman who will do the lathi charge on them. But you hear people giving you examples of Bhai Kanhaiya, who was in the army of Guru Gobind Singh and who at the end of the day's battle would also feed and give water to the soldiers of the enemy's army. So there was a complaint made about what he was doing to Guru Gobind Singh, who asked him to explain. And Bhai Kanhaiya said that for me, I look at it from the prism of humanity, and I do not look at it as our soldiers and theirs when somebody is in need of water. And Guru Gobind Singh's response to that was, "You right now you're giving water, you must also apply salve on their wounds. Malham bhi lagao."
And this is the proud tradition, she says, that people give examples from. This is why culturally, too, these protests are different than what one might see in other places in India.
And in Punjab, again, they will tell you that in Sikh tradition, there is no concept of punishing yourself in the sense of going on hunger strikes. They say our gurus will tell us that you eat and you stand your ground. You eat and you drink and you stand your ground. And then you feed other people also while you're at it.
This is the reason why you would see food and langar being organized for the farmers. And therein lies a strong sense of self. And from this sense of self also flows an anti center sentiment. Plus, Vandita says that more and more this sentiment is actually being directed towards PM Narendra Modi.
I mean, it is Modi who must take responsibility for them in the way that this whole conflict or face off is being imagined by the farmers themselves. It is them ranged against Modi and his laws. And to me, as somebody who has traveled through several states during elections, and especially after Modi has come to power at the center, I have always found that Modi has a certain ability to lift himself above the fray. He has this ability to render the other opponents and also the fray itself smaller than himself. I mean, it's a slate of imagination that he performs. The achievement is that he makes the voters buy into it. So again and again, I've seen, and the example that best sums it up is from Rajasthan, though the BJP government lost under Vasundhara Raje Scindia. The slogan that was put out was, Vasundhara, teri khair nahi, Modi tujhse bair nahi. So we are against Vasundhara, but we are not against Modi.
And that is something she found in Bihar this time as well, where people were angry at Nitish Kumar at the state level, but were for Modi being at the center.
Modi has again and again shown an ability to shrug off the failures and find somebody else to put those on, whether it is his own chief ministers at state level or, the impersonal bureaucracy, or as in demonetization, it was the bank manager. So the others would take the rap for the distortions and the failures, and he would get the credit for the schemes that went well, whether it was Ujjwala, those were his personal stamp. But this is the first time I would say that the confrontation is between the voter and Modi directly, and they are not letting anybody else come in between. So it's again, the self image of the Jat Sikh farmer, that you can get us to do anything for you if you ask us affectionately with love, but you cannot force your way on us. And in that, it has become Modi's zid or obstinacy against our resistance, the Jat Sikhs, Anak. Anak is honor and pride. So it has become a very personal kind of a confrontation between Modi and the Jat farmer. And to me, as a student of politics and elections, this seems to me a new thing.
As the protests have continued, Vandita says that the local political parties in the state have been left behind by this popular upsurge.
So whether it is Congress or it is Akali Dal or it is AAP, and BJP of course is on the other side, but I met up with members of all parties, and again my impression is that they all did not see it coming, and they have tried to jump onto the bandwagon when they saw that this is getting bigger. About the Akali Dal, everybody, even among the farmers, nobody gives them the benefit of doubt. I mean, they claim that from within the NDA, they were already raising their voice against the farm laws. But the popular narrative outside is that their hand was forced only when their own leaders started being heroed on the farm laws. So it was a belated kind of an attempt to jump onto something that had become bigger outside of them and completely despite them. And it's the same thing with the Congress, where I mean, they would not say it on the record, but off the record, I heard leaders say that even those who started talking about potentially these three laws being problematic were sort of not taken seriously. It's only when the protests became big that, the party also officially responded.
And the case is the same for the Aam Aadmi Party, which gained presence in the state in 2017. Vandita says that no one saw it coming, and that it is a big miss, especially for a party like the Akali Dal that projects itself as a pro peasant party.
I mean, I think for all parties, this is going to be a moment of reckoning once this is over. And I hope this will be over soon, because no protest should last this long. A way out should be found. You have people sitting out in this completely bitter cold. But when this is over, and I hope that is soon, all the political parties actually have to go back to the drawing board and see how they can win the people's trust again. Because one thing again that I heard from farmers across the state's three regions was the lack of distrust of the party, because they are not seen to have articulated their concerns on the farm laws. They allowed things to build up outside, and they are seen to have got into it only when their hand was forced by the people.
The protests now seem to be only gaining more strength. As the season for sowing wheat and peas gets over, thousands of farmers from Uttar Pradesh and Uttarakhand have left their hometowns to join the agitation. A UP constable told the Indian Express that the number of protesters went from around 5,000 to 20,000 in just 10 days. Plus, farmers are also planning to come from Maharashtra now. Tomorrow, that is Wednesday, the central government is scheduled to hold talks with the farmer unions once again, which it says will be focused on issues, logic, and facts. Vandita says it's really unsure whether BJP will actually end up repealing the farm laws, even though it has bent much more on these laws than it has vis a vis any other protests in the past.
I mean, last year at around this time, we had the anti CA protests, and we know that the BJP led government did not give in or concede or talk or respond in any manner at all to those protests. So those protests were sort of, they died a natural death because of the coronavirus pandemic. So going by the BJP's record, the BJP does not bend. That is why perhaps Modi is the image of these laws there. This unyielding kind of unforgiving, unyielding, hard state is an worthy enemy for or opponent for the Jat farmer on the other side. But having said that, I really don't know how this is going to end if the government does not repeal these laws.
She says that considering the kind of material, emotional, and political investment that has gone into these protests, it seems like nothing short of repealing the laws would work.
So I would imagine that if the government were to repeal and everybody from the protest side were to go home, and then the government were to bring back these laws in some amended form in parliament and take them through parliament, through select committee, through discussions, that would be a way out, I think. But I'm not sure if the BJP government is going to look at it as a loss of face and not do that. But for the BJP, I mean, I did meet BJP leaders who claimed that the ultimate settlement of this issue, the party would take the credit for it. I don't know. I think for every day that passes without a resolution, that's going to become more and more difficult for the BJP to take any kind of credit away from this.
She says that this way, the BJP has put itself in a corner in Punjab because it has no way of talking to the farmers. This is considering its alliance with the Akali Dal ended over these protests.
The BJP has been a party of the urban Hindus largely in Punjab. It doesn't have a network of leaders among the Sikhs or in the peasantry. So I do not see the BJP, and I do not see the BJP making any kind of a huge outreach to bridge this gulf either. And what they are doing again and again is talking down to the farmers, alleging motives, giving labels, and seeing foreign hands in this. So I do not know where this is going, and I just hope that somebody in the BJP, in the government, is going to look at it again and with a more compassionate gaze.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was written and produced by me, Shashank Bhargav, and as always was edited and mixed by our producer, Joshua Thomas. If you like this show, then you can subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it, share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcast@indianexpress.com.